Hi, it's Mai here, and it's time for my September wrap-up. And the first book that I read in September was Any Other Name by Emma Newman. This is the second book in her The Split World series. I have talked about the first book in the series before, but I'll just quickly tell you again that it is a mixture of an urban fantasy setting and a setting that is this magical otherworld that is sort of stuck in the Victorian era. And the main character is Kathy, who at the beginning of the first book had managed to escape the magical world for a few years and had learned to live with her newfound freedom when she is snatched back to live in the stricter Victorianesque world. There are also fairies in a fae world, and they are amazing. They are pretty much villains, the villains of the story, and you never know what they want. Don't make a wish from a fairy. Don't owe them anything. That's what I've learned from all the books that I've read. Anyway, these two that I have read have been very entertaining, sort of 3-star reads. They haven't been that special. I couldn't say that I loved them, but I have fun while I read them. I really do like Kathy, the main character, and I do like to follow her on her journey, even though the injustice of the Victorian era world makes me mad a lot of the times. There's also this bigger plot of a conspiracy, but for some reason I'm not that interested in that. Perhaps because the characters that have a lot to do with that storyline aren't as interesting to me as Kathy. But yes, I like Kathy and I like the fae aspect, but some of the characters are boring to me, so this is a 3-star read. Next I read The Iron Trial by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare, the first in the Magisterium series. And this book was a bit too young for me. It is about a young boy who goes to attend magic school after his father has told him all his life that magic is evil, this school is evil. And it's about the kids studying at the school, and there's also a sort of twist on the chosen one trope. And that twist was my favorite part of the book, but that comes quite near at the end of the book, and I found the book to be pretty boring before that. Being introduced to a magic school and the kids there and the classes there should have been interesting, but for some reason it wasn't. I like the beginning with the test to get into the school, and I like the ending with the twist of the chosen one trope, but all in all I won't be continuing on with this series. I gave it 2 stars. It was a bit too young for me. It was a middle grade book, but I do enjoy some middle grade books, but they tend to have a more of a feeling of whimsy to them, and this definitely doesn't have that. The next thing that I read was a lot better. It was William Shakespeare's Star Wars, Verily, A New Hope by Ian Docher, and this is the New Hope Star Wars movie written in Shakespearean style. So it is written as a play, and it also has these illustrations. And I found this to be really fun and really clever. Sometimes the lines and the descriptions were done so well. They were so cleverly changed from the movie to fit this Shakespearean style. One thing that I have to say is that if you're a Shakespearean purist, I have a friend who really knows a lot about Shakespeare, and he couldn't get over the fact that Ian Docher uses thou for everyone in this book. There should be thou and you, with thou being the more familiar one. But now some Imperial officers can be a bit too familiar with Darth Vader calling him thou, when they should be calling him you. So if you can't get over this fact, maybe don't pick this one up. But I didn't pay it any attention, and I had a lot of fun. I also liked the snark that was sometimes evident, especially in scenes that were later added to the movies, and those scenes were still in this, but sometimes they were sort of commented upon that maybe they shouldn't be there. I gave Verily, A New Hope 4 stars. Then I read again something completely different. I read A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. This is an essay of hers written after a lecture of hers that she gave in a college, and this really focuses on how women who write need a room of one's own, free time and money of their own. And this was a really, really good read. My favorite read of the month, actually. I gave this one 5 stars. There were some things that I didn't agree on, perhaps, but there was also some really powerful stuff in here. I remember when I finished this, I really wanted to create something. She talks about how women aren't given enough free time, how often women are expected to do everything in a household, for example, and also how men's colleges have more money because how many more men have studied and then donate money to the college where they went, when the women's colleges have to do with less because they are newer and women haven't had the opportunity to study for that long. This was first published in 1928, and it was definitely a 5-star read. And these 3 were the books that I read for the Read Your Bookshelf-a-thon in September. And next I read The Otherling and Other Stories by Anne Leinonen. She is a very prolific science fiction and fantasy author in Finland, and I've only ever read a few of her short stories, so I wanted to sort of get myself more familiar with her, and I read this, a collection of her short stories. I have to say that some of the translation was a bit clunky, could have been better, but there was good stuff in this, especially the title story, The Otherling, was really good. It was about this alien race where they model themselves after the race that currently finds them. So currently humans have found this alien race and they are sort of modeling themselves after humans and to be helpful to humans, and it was really, really interesting. This definitely had a lot of different types of short stories, but like I said, the title one, which is the most science fiction one of them, was my favorite. I gave this one 3 stars, like I usually do short story collections, because usually there are some that I enjoy and some that I enjoy less. Then it was time to read some of my Kindle books. I started reading the short story Marine Biology by Gail Carriger. Usually I really enjoy Gail Carriger, but this I think could have used a lot more development. It was about werewolves and merpeople, and it was actually quite an interesting premise, but I think it could have been developed more. I think it sort of rushed through. It could have been longer. There were things happening and it rushed through them, and especially the romance in it was a bit rushed. I didn't feel like the main characters had that much time to develop a chemistry between them. So it's sort of abrupt. I only gave it 2 stars. Then I read a novella by Mary Robinette Kowal, The Escapement of Blackledge. And this was a thing that started as Mary Robinette Kowal's April Fool's joke. So one April Fool's Day, she tweeted that her friend had found an erotic fan fiction set in her Glamorous Histories universe, when in fact she had written the whole thing herself. And it was definitely a lot of fun. It was about a female thief and a male inventor, and it had romance and burglary. I found it quite entertaining. I gave it 3 stars. One thing that I had trouble with was because I had read so much Gail Carriger before reading this, that I was sort of in the Gail Carriger universe, and I had to readjust myself because Gail Carriger's universe is Victorian era with a lot more steampunky elements and supernatural elements thrown in, when Mary Robinette Kowal's universe is the Regency era, but with just some magic in it. Magic that's called glamour. And I kept expecting more steampunky elements in this just because I had been reading so much Gail Carriger, but once I did that readjustment in my head, I enjoyed it a lot more. I was a bit confused. I've been reading too much Gail Carriger, if that's possible. Then I finished another Gail Carriger book, the 3rd book in the Finishing School series, Waistcoats and Weaponry, which I've been reading with a couple of other booktubers. I'll link them down below. And this was my least favorite in the series, mostly because it focused on the love triangle and because I found it quite boring for most of the time. Most of it was set on a train, and usually I like that setting, but now I found it boring. There was also a plot element that was used in the Parasol Protectorate series to, I think, a much greater impact. So all in all, I didn't really enjoy this book. I gave it only 2.5 stars. Next, I finished a graphic novel called Bodies by C. Spencer and a bunch of artists. This was set in a couple of different eras. Some of them were historical, one contemporary and one futuristic era, where these different characters find a similar body, pretty much the same body. And all the different eras were drawn by different artists. I found this to be a really clever trick, but I don't think I really got it. C. Spencer had this big idea behind it and some philosophical musings, and I sort of just went after finishing it. So it really didn't work for me. I gave it 2 stars. Next I finished Hen Chick episode 1 by Tristan J. Tarwater. This is a story that was first published in episodes, but now I think it's only available as a whole book or just this one first episode separately. So I read that one. I didn't give this a star rating because it was pretty much a first chapter of a book. This is about a girl called Azria who has studied magic and is just about to take her final exam, and she's also waiting for her mother, who is a pirate captain, to come and take her away with her. All the characters are characters of color. The setting and the characters were quite fun, but the writing style didn't completely convince me, so I think I won't be buying the whole book, but it definitely felt like it would have been a whimsical swashbuckling story, a quick adventure, but since it didn't fully convince me, I think I'm going to pass. Then I finally finished my finishing school read with Manners and Mutiny, the fourth book in the series by Gail Carriger. This was a very action-packed installment in the series. I'm not going to talk much about it since it is the last book, but I gave it 3 stars. This series has been quite steady 3 stars for me. The second book got 4 stars, the third one got 2.5 stars, but they have been entertaining, but I definitely don't enjoy them as much as I do Carriger's adult books. They were fun, but I just didn't connect with the characters as much as I did with that one. So the next to last thing that I read was my second favorite read of the month. That was Mind of My Mind by Octavia E. Butler. This is the second book in her Pattern Master series. I have the bind-up of the 4 books in the series in the inner chronology order. So I have read Wild Seed before, and now I read the second book, Mind of My Mind. Wild Seed was about 2 immortals, with one of them really obsessed with creating a telepathic race of humans of his own. He is breeding humans together and really doesn't care about their lives. I did enjoy the first book, but because one of the characters was so reprehensible, I found it really exhausting to read about, so I gave that one 3 stars. So the second book is set in contemporary times. The focus has been shifted so that the main character is one of the telepathic humans who is the result of the breeding program of one of the immortals. And that shifting of the point of view really worked for me. So this focused on one girl who is just coming to her telepathic abilities, and she is actually a really powerful telepath. And previously, the immortals, telepathic humans, either have gone insane or they can't stand each other. The main character of this, Mary, is one of the strongest and most well-adjusted born. And for some reason, I found reading this was a lot like reading Queen of the Damned when I was a teen. I don't know why it was. There's a lot of different characters in this one, though Mary is the one that's focused on. There are some other point of view characters. This and Queen of the Damned aren't that similar, but for some reason the mood of them, for me, felt the same. My reading experience was sort of similar. It's really short, but a lot is done in the time, and I gave this one 4 stars. And finally we come to the last book that I read in September, and that was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by Jack Thorne, J.K. Rowling and John Tiffany. I actually didn't hate this one like a lot of people did. I gave this one 3 stars. I really enjoyed the 2 new characters, Albus and Scorpius, the teenage boys, Harry's and Draco's sons, who are the main characters on the adventure in this. I have done a whole written review of this on Goodreads, which I'll link down below. But basically, I had fun during the first part and less so during the second part. The plot really isn't that great, but I had a lot of fun, like I said, following Albus and Scorpius, and the first part focused more on them, which is why I liked that one and would have given that one 4 stars. Scorpius especially is a really great new character. He was my favorite. He was so funny, he got the best lines, and I liked how he treated Albus and sort of brought him down to earth when he was getting wrapped too much into his own problems. And I also found Draco's and Scorpius's relationship to be much more interesting than the father-son relationship that the play focused on, which was Harry and Albus. I think one of the reasons that I was able to enjoy this play was because back when I read the Harry Potter books, I wasn't that invested in the main trio, because I read them when I was about 18. I was more into the teacher characters and the marauders than the main trio, so it didn't bother me that much when they were out of character. I have to say that the Harry parts in this play were the weakest and the most boring, and some of them could have been easily left out and the play would have been better. That was the reason why I didn't like the second part that much, because it focused a lot more on the older characters, so Harry, Hermione and Ron. I could no longer ignore them, and I couldn't ignore the plot since it was focused on so heavily, so that's why the second part took the rating down to 3 stars. One thing that I have to say, that the female characters really didn't get that much to do. The shortest end of the stick goes to Ginny, who was just there basically as a wife character to comfort or scold Harry, and to Rose. When I heard that Hermione and Ron's daughter Rose would be in the play, I thought she would actually get a part, but she's pretty much not even there for most of the play. So that was my September wrap-up. It was an okay month. I had about 3 great reads. Most of them were pretty mediocre, so not the best month, but not too bad. Leave me a comment if you want. Let's talk more about these books, and I will see you later.